Welcome guys to a new video on the channel. Today we go over the Steam Maiden deck. It's a very fun deck, it's a very interesting deck, it has a lot of combo potential. And of course, since the new cards will be revealed tomorrow, I thought why not make a deck build for it. So I will go over the list. I will first go over the list, then go into why the reasons behind the card. So you can just take a look at what ratios I play at what card and what card specifically. And then we will go over the combos once again. So hopefully you guys enjoy this type of video, and comment down below if any questions, and we will just go right into the deck profile. So first, of course, we have a starter, nothing really out of the ordinary, just a starter you prefer. Then of course, since it's a Steam Maiden deck, we play 4 copies of the main boss unit. It's of course Elo, and she's just very wonderful, combines the deck really well, and we'll just go over. Then 2 copies of your piano. He's like your main finish in the deck, where you can make a Valatory effect for the entire turn. So that's really about it. Then of course you need Steam Maiden cards to make the Steam Maiden engine like viable. So we play 4 copies of the Grade 2 Steam Maiden. I think one of the most brickiest pieces of them all, but still we play it at 4 copies. Then 4 copies of the all stable since set 1 for gears. It's Nabu, make soul, not that really major in this deck. In this deck it's actually about the bind, but yeah, you can have different reasonings behind it. Again, and 3 copies of Grunda, also very good and stable card. I really like to have a more like a very good whiteboard in the early game, where you have lots of angles to go from. And of course can do out different kinds of cards, for different approaches of them. And then 2 copies of Cardboom, which is the card that unbreaks the most in this deck, which is really nice, but of course you want to combo off, so not that. 4 copies of the Grade 1 Steam Maiden that actually has a free or a Vanguard Circle skill, so really good of course. And yeah, you just need to play this at 4. Like if you want to have a Steam Maiden, the Grade 1 is the best out of all. And then of course we play 4 copies of Steam Maiden Wibble, also a Steam Maiden. Like what I always say about this card, when you don't have a reason to play with 4 copies of Wibble, you will find a reason to play 4 copies of Wibble. And also for the same for this deck, you have the reason to play 4 copies of Wibble because it's so impactful. Then 4 copies of Steam Breath. You really want to hit your correct grade 3 of course, and that's why we play it at 4 copies. And 2 copies of this Grade 1. It's just your combo extender, I will talk about it later. Then for the trigger lineup, I play accordingly like 3 crits with an additional 3 crits, so I play 6 crits in total. This makes it so I play more draw triggers, so I will play 2 draws as just normal draw triggers and 4 RPGs. This deck is very combo reliant in the sense that you really need to have different cards in your hand of course. So this is a variant on how you can of course achieve that by drawing a little bit more cards. Then we go over the last card, which is actually really important because it's not a heal card, but it's actually 4 copies of Voodoo, which you need in this deck because it's a Steam Maiden and you want to of course begin with your grade 0s. So that's it for the deck recipe itself, nothing really out of the ordinary I think. I will just go over the reasonings of how I play certain cards. We'll just go right into it. Okay, so we'll just go right through the deck once again, but then with reasonings and how we play them. So we play 4 copies of Elo, and the reason behind we play around this card because it can do almost everything this deck needs. Like, it can make your field, which is a plus, and can set up your bind swap, which is a plus. Gives you counter charge option and extra attack, which is a plus, and she becomes huge in the late game. Or actually already in the early to mid game she can already be pretty big. So like 4 different reasonings why we play this card at 4. Also the main reason why we play this card as our main grade 3, because not that many grade 3 synergize with her, like as a main grade 3. Like of course you have the We Innovate Wing Dragon, and I think it's a good card. But I just don't prefer because it's a turn 3 card, in the sense that you can only call it on turn 3. This deck really wants to push opponent as high as damage as possible, so you want more grade 2/grade 1s in your deck, if possible of course. Also you really need to play the piano, which we'll go over later. and you have just different angles on how you want to approach the deck. Like for myself, I really like to play with the cards I have at my disposal at the moment of time, and I don't just want to gamble to like throw away all of my pieces that I have on the record circle and then hope I get good cards out of 3. Yes, it's not primarily cool, but when you cannot back up your own field with good cards, of course, then you're a little bit screwed. Because what happens with, of course, we innovate from Dragon is your hand size isn't that big. Like you can commit from hand, and you generally get those cards back, but you cannot commit, find them, and then recommit extra cards if your top 3 isn't that good. So that's how that's the reason why I don't play the Innovate Wing Dragon, but it's an option which is of course to your own liking. Then as the backup for 3, which is just your finisher, it's Piano Boy, which is of course Amusement Colossus, and I would just really like him. Like what you can do is, like for example, you go into your combo turn, you can make a total for like 8-9 attacks, and with this card it makes it so, let's say for example your opponent is on 4 damage, they can take 1 damage of course, and then they need to guard 8 attacks. 8 attacks equals like 2 cards from hand. It kills almost every deck, and that's why we play 2 copies of it, because of course you can search it out with of course the likes of Buddha and everything, but you just also want to see it because seeing it is more useful than you go into comboing it. So that's the reason behind the grade 3 lineup, and we'll just go over the grade 2s. Then I already said this is the most brickiest card of the month, but you really need to play it at 4 or at least at 3, and I just like it at 4 because the reason for it of course is that if for example you need to ride it, you really want to see it to finish your game as fast as possible, because it extends or attack by 1, and that extension by 1 attack is really huge because of many different factors. So of course when she's being placed from the bind zone, you can bind an additional card for your drop zone. You gain 3k for every crate you palm, which is just in average already quite good, because most of the time you will bind in grade 3s, so she will be a 19k attacker. On the force market it's 29, not that shabby. And what this deck really likes is that you go from low numbers to high numbers. So let's say for example you attack with Ulu as your first attack, go into your grade 1 Steam Maiden, which is 15 to 18 on the force marker, and then you go to 29. So let's say for example your opponent got defense trigger, like on the Ulu attack, you boost your 18k with the 8k of course, so it will be 26, hits best defensive, this hit for 29, which hits the best defensive, and then you go into your grade 3, which is 13 on itself, on the force mark is also 23, it's best defensive. So the deck really works around hitting above your opponent's thresholds of course, and that's really good. But let's say for example you ride one of these, you really want to see the second one, so you really want to play more copies of her if possible, at least I would say 3, but it's a little bit of bricky, but you really want to see that extra attack, because what happens with extra attack is, let's say for example you don't get this, then your grade 2 attack will only be 20. That's really small compared to the 29, because it doesn't hit best defensives. Also, don't get an additional attack from any of these, so these also don't hit best defense because you don't even have the attack. And of course when you need to, you can also of course call out Colossus from the bind zone when need be. So with that you gain a card during the entire turn. Also you can of course call Elo to the rear guard circle, because it also gains power on the rear guard circle, because you can also probably hit past the 28k. So you have different reasons, and it's mostly about power, especially when you want to press your opponent. Why we play it at 4 copies. So that's really it. Then for the other grade 2, which is Naboo, I also played that 4. What I really like about this card is in the early setup. But let's say for example, I have my grade 1 that I wrote over my Vanguard. I sold +1, bind a card and draw 2 cards probably, because of if you buy Ulu. Then you have of course the grade 0 in your drop zone, or like the grade 0 you have in your bind zone, but you also have a starter in your drop zone. So let's say for example you want to press your opponent, then this card will never be an empty card, because it can still bind a grade 0 from your background or from your drop zone. And with that you always gain value out of her. But let's say for example your opponent tried to rush you a little bit with grade 1s, you can call out Punta, go out Naboo that way, Soul Blast out your grade 1 of course, and with that you already have your grade 1 bound set up for your first grade 3 turn, because with Naboo you can instantly bind it, so you have your grade 0 in your bind zone, and probably grade 1, which is just a really nice combo to begin with. And the soul you will gain back because Naboo goes into the soul. So Kunta only gets cost counterless in this scenario. You get a little bit of a setup, and of course you have like 3 good attacks. Also your opponent cannot use heal guards against this attack, which is in general really nice to have. So I really like this at 4 copies of it. And let's say for example your opponent, or let's say for example you go from your grade 0 to your grade 1, you can also go into this and go it out to bring or draw additional cards if this is also stuck in your bind zone of course. Then I already explained Kunta, but also for an additional reason, it can search any Steam Maiden you like. Like you can even search out your grade 1, your grade 2, your grade 3. You just need to build that correct grade from yourself or your opponent, whatever you need. So that's why we play 3 copies of him. Then the reason why I play 2 copies of Caliban, as I said, the grade 2 is really tricky. So let's say for example we didn't hit it, or we need to ride it and we cannot really bound it. What happens is, let's say for example we go into our grade 0, then our grade 1, grade 2. What happens now is that this will spin an opponent's record back to the bottom of the deck, and it will also be bound. And the bound fact is really good because let's say for example you really need to put your resources in binding your grade 1s and 0s. You don't have to resource to bind your grade 2. You just make a column on one side with the grade 0 already, use your grade 1 set up in the bind zone, and this just on the side. This will snap an opponent's trigger to the bottom of the deck. You can do the stuff according to the grade of that card. Then this will be stuck in the bind zone, but with the other column you can just go into it once again and spin another stuff back. So this can refund itself. So let's say for example it's spin back a grade 1, then it doesn't cost a counter blast, and this column also doesn't cost a counter blast for Caliban if you spin back a grade 1 or less. And with that you essentially didn't use any counter blast, because in grade 0 you essentially just counters, because if you go from a grade 0 to grade 1 due to Elo skill, you will get a counter charge. If you go from a grade 1 to a grade 2, yes it costs a counter blast, but netto it will reduce itself. Like you counters first, then you use the counter blast, and then there's also a counter blast, but then will counter itself immediately back. So with that you don't use any counter blast, but you still get some combos of draw some cards, return stuff to your opponent's deck, and since it's at the bottom, they sometimes not even have the opportunity to search for it. Let's say for example they are playing Prism, which really makes you wish you early, then you don't see their set house for 1. The grade 1, which has just an amazing Vanguard circle skill, which you really want to hit with of course heal guards, or the heal triggers I mean, and that's why we played it 4 copies. Also the best Steam Maidens, because every grade 2 in this deck is really good to go into. The grade 3s are also really good, but they're more like finishers. The grade 2 are really good because it can combo off, do multiple things and stuff. Because let's say for example you have a grade 0 ready into your back row, you can of course go from a grade 0 to your grade 1 to a grade 2, go out to a Kunta, spin back your own grade 0, get another grade 1 out, which can be a Steam Maiden, go from a grade 2, go from a grade 3, so you can do very good multi-tech options with that of course. Also you can use Naboo to make some to make some very nasty card effects, nasty combo potential, draw some cards back. So Soul you have different angles you can go to, and the grade 1s have the best opportunity or the best options to their disposal. For Ribbles, Ribble is one of the best cards in Gear Chronicle right now, so that's why we majorly play it at 4 copies. Also we have reasons to play it at 4 because of the other cards we've just seen now. 4 copies of Steam Ref. You really want to see the grade 3 of course, because we play low copies of it. That's the primary reason. Also you can discard your Ribble, which is really nice, like for example Lost Skill 8 you cannot really do that, because you need to discard the sum of grade 3, and we don't really have a huge hand size in this deck, so that's why we play currently on this. Also 13k booster is really nice. Let's say for example you have grade 2s and everything like that, just having 23 is already pretty good. and then we play 2 copies of this because it will just be an attack extender during the battle phase with Wibble, and Wibble is a Steam Maiden which can go into grade 2 due to your Vanguard skill. So it's sort of unbreaks in the sense that you fill it to your hand, you can multi-attack off, doesn't really cost you counter blast, is actually a good beater. Very many different options to play, and you just need to see and play the deck yourself to understand, of course. And then from the trigger lineup, this deck is quite like resource management, resource heavy. So we want to see more draws, to see more units to our hand, because when units are on our hand, then we have access to it. We can either discard it to bind it from drop zone later. You can either just bind it directly from hand due to piano skill. You have many different options, and then of course you have the heals, which you just need because you need to go from a grade 0 Steam Maiden to begin with. More, I hope that it will change, that we get some more consistency pieces in the next reveals, of course, which for me is of course tomorrow. This deck I think needs to start off with Marissa, because the high roll or like the combo potential of this deck is better than Chronogent. Like this deck is really good, only it needs consistency. Hopefully we will get that, and we'll just see tomorrow. So comment down below if you have any questions. I will probably make a reaction video for tomorrow for the Steam Maidens, and I will see you guys later. Goodbye.